These two are the most common Fujifilm lenses out there. The Fujinon 23mm f2 lens and the Fujinon 35mm f2 lens, also commonly known as Fujicrons. I recently did a full review of the 35mm f2 lens, and I initially thought about doing a versus video, comparing these two and pitting them against each other. However, I changed my mind. A comparison video is not necessary. Let's talk about it. Hi everybody and welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Jorge. On this channel we talk about photography and filmmaking. We merge creativity and productivity to live a fulfilling life. In today's video we're talking about these two lenses, which one should be your first prime lens. These are so similar that it really comes down to your preferences, your focal length of choice, and how you like to shoot. Now, I do have a preference and I'll mention it later, but for now we'll talk about the lenses, we'll show you samples, and talk about my experiences as well. Let's get started. One of the reasons why I changed my mind about making a comparison or a versus video is because the lenses themselves are very similar. Alright, so if you compare them against each other, then these are similar in size, in weight, in image quality, focusing speeds, and most importantly, the price as well. Although, as always, I recommend getting these used and saving some cash. But when you compare them to the other versions of the same focal length, then these are cheaper than any of the 1.4 versions, are faster than the first gen 1.4, and are weather resistant as well. So it really comes down to which one do you prefer to use and which one do you like best. And just like that, a comparison video or a versus video between these two lenses talking about dimensions and weight and size and things like that doesn't really matter. It doesn't bring anything to the conversation, it doesn't add any value. The real difference between these two lenses is in the focal length. There is a clear difference in focal length, compression, and bokeh between these two lenses. And that has a direct impact on your results and the feeling that you're trying to evoke with your images. And in all honesty, this is the first thing you should be considering. What are you trying to achieve with your images? What moments are you trying to create? What memories are you trying to capture? More often than not, there's a lens that works best for your type of photography and the style that you have chosen. A lens that could potentially make your life easier. For example, you might find it easier or hear people say and suggest doing portraits and wedding photography with a 35mm lens, or landscape photography with a 14mm or 16mm lens. But even then, these are just suggestions and what the majority of people do. Do not feel constrained by guidelines or rules of what lenses to use for what type of photography. Test the lenses yourself. Arrive at your own conclusions. For example, take a look at some of these landscape images. These were paid projects for department stores in Japan, taken with the X100F. And honestly, it's not really landscape images per se, and I'm not using the widest lens or the lens suggested for that type of photography. However, I think it's very clear the feeling and the look that I was trying to achieve with these photographs. So choosing a focal length based on the type of photography that you're trying to achieve is not some sort of sacred rule that must not be broken. It's just a useful reminder or a general guideline of what to expect and how some of these lenses can make your life easier in each type of photography. Keep that in mind. And since my main focus is street photography, there's a couple things that I'd like to mention regarding these lenses here. A 35mm lens adds a pleasant compression and bokeh to my images. It creates separation between you and your subjects, which might help shy people that want to avoid confrontation, getting noticed, or any sort of conflict or interaction while doing street photography. The 23mm lens lets you capture a wider range of moments, forces you to get closer to your subjects, and even works with pseudo-landscape photography as well. But it might feel too generic to some people out there, too multi-purpose. I would like to try to avoid the following. I like this lens, you should buy it. I like this lens, you should buy it. That doesn't really help anybody. You're supposed to reach a conclusion and try to present the information to help people out there trying to make a decision and choose a lens. Instead, take a look at this. These are the three most common lenses for street photography. The 23mm, the 35mm, and here you would have the 18mm f2 lens. It's a lot easier to jump from the 23 to the 18, or from the 23 to the 35. Let's call this a gradual adjustment. It's a lot more difficult to jump from the 18 to the 35 and vice versa. It's hard to justify the price and the lens if you haven't used lenses on the opposite spectrum. Let's call it a huge leap. Getting a fixed lens camera like the X100 series removes the paradox of choice. You can just focus on working with what you have and not worry about carrying lenses or a camera bag or anything like that. You make do with what you have. But the beauty of getting the XT series or the X Pro series is the fact that you have the option to change lenses. So the system you choose dictates your capabilities and future considerations and questions as well. And like I have mentioned before, I personally think that the best way to learn is to do the thing and then try to teach it to others. So I bought this lens and I used it exclusively for about 3 months before I made my review and before I even talk about it publicly. In fact, it stayed on my camera for the whole 3 months. No distraction, full commitment to one lens and one lens only. And it will be a lot easier for you to follow that methodology and learn by doing when the change is a gradual adjustment and not a huge leap. Keep that in mind. Looking back at my experiences, I learned more about photography and immersed myself in my craft during my 1 year abroad than any other time in my life. To summarize it, all I try to do is create memories and capture moments in time that resemble the look of cinema. Cinema is my inspiration, my goal, and what I try to achieve. And that makes me a little bit biased towards the 23mm f2 lens, a 35mm equivalent in full frame. All I had during that year abroad was my X100T until it died, and later on the X100F, just one camera, just one lens, and nothing else. Later on, I reviewed the X Pro 1, and I quickly learned that the magic of having the option to change lenses was incredible. The option to choose is all that I ask. However, that does not mean that you have to have a bunch of lenses. A camera bag full of lenses that never gets used. Even with an XT camera or an X Pro camera, I would still start my photography journey with the 23mm f2 lens, get used to it, and then make gradual adjustments to other focal lenses as I progress in my photography journey. And that helps keep your photography everyday carry as small and minimal as possible, just focusing on enjoying your craft and taking photographs. So that is what I think about these two lenses, but more importantly, that is why I think that the 23mm f2 lens should be your first Fujifilm Prime. As always, I am curious to know, what do you think? Do you own this lens? Do you own the 35mm f2? Do you own them both? Share your thoughts in a comment down below. But that is it for today's video. If you found this video helpful or valuable, please like and subscribe, follow me on Instagram, and join my free newsletter as well. Thank you very much for watching, for giving me your time and your energy, and good luck with your creative process.